Oxford from the inside. The good, the bad, but always the truth. Hi, I'm Abbie, and welcome to this episode of Oxford from the Inside. The good, the bad, but always the truth. Today we're joined by Mary, who is a fellow podcaster, interviewer, and she's also my sister. Would you like to introduce yourself, talk a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, of course. So as Abbie said, I'm Mary, and I'm going into my third year studying biochemistry at Somerville College.
Cracking. And to lead on from that, obviously it's a pleasure to have you on the show today. And today we will be talking about basically applying for biochem and just sort of writing a really good personal statement for biochemistry. So I think I'll just start with just the general question, like, what is biochemistry like at Oxford? And do you enjoy your degree?
Yeah, biochemistry at Oxford is intense for sure, but it is really, really good. I think the great thing about biochemistry is that you are looking at everything at this molecular cellular level, and the crazy intricate details of our body are just thrown at us, and it's literally insane. And sometimes you really have to stop and think and be like, whoa, this is crazy that all this is happening in our body all the time, and it's so perfectly controlled and regulated. So yeah, it is really, really fascinating, but be prepared to do a lot of work, because it is a lot of work and it is quite hard, but it's so rewarding as well. Yeah, definitely.
That's really, really good. And I suppose I can second that because I remember absolutely loving the sort of intricate details of the body when I did biology A level. And I'm sure that's probably like an insult to you at this point, like you doing like these really in-depth like stuff in biochem. But yeah, I get where you're coming from. So I was going to say, like, on a scale of 1 to 10 then, with obviously 1 being like super duper easy, like a walk in the park, and 10 being like quite difficult. How tough would you say sort of applications are for biochemistry, and why do you say that?
Okay, so really, I think biochemists get it quite lucky because we don't have an admissions test. We don't have to give in any written work. I think nearly every subject at Oxford requires an admissions test, so we got really, really lucky. So it really is just the personal statement in the interviews. Um, yeah, I mean, obviously the interviews are intense and scary and tricky, and they fry your brain, but they're also like a really great opportunity to talk to like top professors at Oxford. Is yeah, amazing. But also, yeah, the personal statement takes a lot of drafting and things. So I guess everything considered, I'd give it around a 7, 8. But I know it could be so much worse with an admissions test, etc. So I really can't complain.
I suppose I'd say that's like a good like way to put it. And I think I agree with you there because O Sciences didn't have an admissions test either. And I'd say that because of that, I think it puts it higher. But I remember when I was talking to a biologist, they said it puts them at a disadvantage because they think it sort of puts more weight on the fact that they're looking more at your personal statement, more at your teacher's grades. But I mean, I always just say that if I had to have done an admissions test, then I wouldn't have gone in. So, so I mean, I don't know if you agree, but
Definitely.
yeah.
But also I think that this is why this video is so important, because like you said, I don't know exactly, but I suppose that yes, because so many people apply to biochemistry, it's like I think last year it was around 800 for like 100 places. I think my year was like around that too. Um, and so they've got to whistle them down somehow, and without an admissions test, the personal statement must be important. So yeah, I guess definitely listen to the advice in this video, because the personal statement is quite important.
Brilliant. Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously the personal statement is very important. So Mazzy will tell you how to write it. So my question is then, how did you, just you generally, how did you like go about writing your personal statement for biochemistry?
Okay, well, me generally, I okay. So I think how I started writing my personal statement was, so I just done 2 summer schools that summer. I done the unique summer school for biochemistry, and then the SunTrust summer school in Cambridge for chemistry. So I'd had lots of talks about how to write a personal statement and da 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 da. And so I came home from both of them, and I just sat down and I just blurted everything I could think of onto a page. And none of it made sense. It wasn't even proper sentences, but I just wanted to get everything down so it was down. Because I'm very much like that. I like everything to be on a piece of paper so that I can see and then I can work from it from there. And that's exactly what I did. So from there, I looked at what I discussed. I looked at the different topics I covered and tried to look for links between them, and things like that. And from there, I got rid of the things that maybe I wasn't that passionate about, or things that I thought weren't that interesting, or things that weren't as relevant. Got rid of those. And then with what I was left with, I started discussing these in more detail, maybe reading up on a few things to make sure I understood it properly, to be able to talk about it confidently in a personal statement. And yeah, and eventually a few drafts down the line, a few checks from teachers and people, I was ready to go. Yeah.
That's really good. I think that's a really good point to note, is that don't expect to have a completely perfect personal statement at the beginning, because I mean, I had so many drafts of my personal statement by the end, and I think I adopted like a similar approach to you, Mary. Like, I just sort of just thought about all the stuff which I'd done, which could be related to my degree, and just put it all on a page. I think I had at least 3 pages of like just different stuff. Um, so I was just thinking, that was sort of one method that you could use. What sort of advice would you give to students who might not be able to just think of stuff that they've done and just put it on a page? Like, is there another way you could go about writing a personal statement?
Yeah, I think a really important thing is to understand the key things that the biochemistry tutors are looking for, whether that be at Oxford or any university. So I'd look up on the website exactly what they're looking for in their students. It normally says exactly what they're looking for, that we know, enthusiastic, problem-solving students, I don't know. They make it quite clear. So have a look and read up on their websites. And from there, you can look at the key skills that they like to see, and just make sure you show that in a personal statement and try and interweave that as much as possible. So for example, important for biochemistry is things like data handling and problem solving. Well, I done my Welsh Baccalaureate extended writing project, individual project, which is basically a Welsh version of the EPQ, on like the difference in prevalence of Alzheimer's between men and women. And so there's a lot of data handling and problem solving and drawing conclusions from lots of data in that. And therefore I put that onto my personal statement to cover those skills that were required. And you could sort of do it that way, skills based maybe. Yeah, another thing you can do is maybe look at the universities you're interested in applying to and have a look at the different research they're doing at the moment, and try and interweave that into it if you want. So for example, if you see that Oxford are doing, for example, at the moment, the coronavirus vaccine, and you're interested in viruses and how they work and how vaccines are, you know, formed and produced, etc., then you could maybe read into that a little bit more and discuss that in your personal statement. So you could use that as inspiration. So yeah, there's loads of different ways you can do it, but I just found, for me, blurting it all down and then using that to structure it was the best. But everyone's different, so find your method and yeah, work with it.
No, that's really good. And definitely what you said about looking at like the research which is being done at universities. I think that's really good, because for example, you can literally look at you know, current tutors and lecturers in in departments, and sometimes they might even upload some of their papers for free that you can read and study. And the only issue with that is, you have, if you then put it in your personal statement and then go for an interview and they interview you, you have to understand the subject. Is there anything you want to add to that, about sort of, you need to know your topic in your personal statement, but like before you go for an interview, sort of related to that?
Definitely. Obviously you can't prepare for an interview. You'd never know what's going to come up. There's no way to do it. But one of my top things to do before you go into an interview, and it's what I did, was I made a list of everything I mentioned on my personal statement, every little thing, and I read up on everything and made sure that I could speak about it confidently. And I'm not saying you need to know loads of stuff in loads and loads of detail, but just enough that I could talk to the tutor about it. It's just so important, because if you put something down on that personal statement and they ask you about it and you're like, oh, I just don't know. For example, I put down that I'd done some PCR in a summer school. Polymerase chain reaction is a like experimental procedure, done a lot in biochemistry. And so one of my questions in my interviews was, what do you need in a PCR reaction mixture? So imagine if I'd done it on the summer school, But I mean, it's a few months later that you have your interview. I could have completely forgotten. So thank God I read up on that and read up about the PCR process, understood what it did and what was needed inside it. Because if I hadn't, they'd be like, oh, right, okay, so maybe you're not. I mean, you don't need to know everything before you go into an interview, but they do expect you to understand what you've written about on your personal statement. So yeah. And also I remember before going to my interview, I got told who my 2 interviewers were going to be, the 2 main interviews for the 2 colleges. Oh, maybe I only knew my one from Somerville. And my tutor did work on GPCRs, which are a type of receptor protein in the membrane and things. I didn't have a clue what any of this was. I just did not have a clue. So I looked it up on the internet on Wikipedia because I wanted to read about it to try and look clever in my interview. And I just started reading and had no clue what I was reading and just thought, oh, right, okay, it doesn't matter. I'll leave that. So don't stress too much about knowing everything or knowing the ins and outs of what your tutor has studied and things. But just be confident on what you've written about in your personal statement. Yeah, that was a very long-winded way of saying that. I'm really sorry.
No, that was really good. There were some really good points there. And I think that's a good point to note, that you can, if you do know your tutors beforehand, maybe, yeah, look up their research. So maybe you can get in their good books like, oh, what's this about, finding bacteria in the 2 billion years ago, like talk to me about that. But yeah, that's very good. But like you said, don't worry about not being an expert in their subject, because these people have been doing it for years and years, and they've literally focused down, they've done PhDs and master's degrees like on this stuff, so don't worry about having to know it like back to back. So I just thought, for biochemistry, is there like a particular structure you should adopt for your for writing your personal statement, or just in general for a personal statement? Is there like a particular structure which would be useful to use?
Yeah, now you've said it. Looking back at my personal statement, I don't really think I did it based on topic. I did it more based on what I'd done. So each paragraph was something different I'd done. So the first paragraph was obviously just introducing things, But from then on, the second paragraph was about unique summer school and a lecture I'd had there and what I found interesting in that lecture, and therefore I read an article that covered this sort of information too and just discussed that. Then I also discussed, okay, my second paragraph was also about unique, but more about the experimental things we did. And then I also talked about my Sutton Trust Cambridge summer school in that too. Then my third paragraph was about my, like I said before, my Welsh Bac extended essay. And then my final one was just extracurriculars. So yeah, I think mine was based more on what I'd done, but as you did for your personal statement, you could do it based on different topics and then try and lead that into the next paragraph and things. There's so many ways you can do it. And I was just so lucky to have done these summer schools and things, but not everyone's going to have access to this because of coronavirus or this, that, and the other. So you could do it based, like I said, based on topics, and you can discuss maybe a book and a podcast you've listened to about this particular topic, and then another paragraph about a lecture and I know a MOOC, an online course you did for this topic. So yeah, whichever way you fancy doing it, but that's just how I did mine.
No, that's really, really good. Yeah, and I would literally say, like, obviously I did mine slightly different, and I did it sort of topic by topic. I had my paragraphs leading into the next one, but you sort of wrote based on your experience. So I was thinking, like, you did mention about how, like, sometimes, like, especially because of this year, because of like the coronavirus and pandemic and everything, what sort of things could students go about doing, and what sort of can you recommend any sort of good resources or whatever which would be useful for biochemistry, which maybe don't require you having to leave your house or fly on a plane or whatever?
Yeah, definitely. There's so much you can do from home, like so much you need to do. And it doesn't have to that you need to do, I meant that you can do. And you really don't need to read loads and loads of books. I read one book for my entire personal statement. Because I didn't find reading a book about biochemistry as fun as maybe doing a summer school or an online course or listening to a podcast. So there's no hierarchy of great supercurriculars you can do. But some examples are, yes, reading popular science books that are like biochemistry related, So I read Junk DNA by Nessa Carey, it was really good actually. It was really interesting. But I also read a scientific review. You can listen to podcasts, online lectures. These online courses are so good now. I don't know how I didn't think of doing one for my personal statement. I just didn't. But I know so many people who did, and they're so useful and really cool to show your enthusiasm for your subject. Yeah, well, I mean, there's so many things you can do. I suppose outside of coronavirus times, there's things called Nuffield research placements where you can go and work in a lab at a local university for 4 weeks. I didn't do that, but that's a really cool option. I know one of the other biochemists at Somerville in my year did that, and he loved it. So yeah, there really is a huge range of things you can do, and don't panic that coronavirus has stopped you from going here, there, and everywhere, this lab, that lab. Also, you don't need to have done work experience for biochemistry anyway. They don't expect that at all. But as long as you can show that you have an interest in the more practical aspect of biochemistry too, because I think especially at Oxford, the biochemistry course is training you up to be a good research biochemist. So they, it's very much about the practical and the research. And okay, we discovered this protein. We're going to talk to you about this process, but we're also going to tell you exactly about how we found out how this process worked, what studies we did, what techniques we used. And personally, I've realised that I'm not that interested in that sort of thing. I prefer the theory a lot more than the actual practical aspect, but it's a big component of the Oxford course. So if you can demonstrate that you're passionate about that and interested in that, even if you come to hate it like me, no, I'm joking, I love it, really, then yeah, that's fine. So yeah, just demonstrate your passion. It doesn't matter what you talk about, really. Just show your passion about biochemistry.
I mean, I'm quite glad you brought that up, that there are going to be points of your degree that you dislike. And I think you're passionate, even if you are really passionate about it, like you said, you love the theory, you might not be passionate about, like you said, the practical aspects. So you said like it's really good to show passion and enthusiasm for your degree, and that's like I think that's a key thing. That's like one of the highlighting things you have to show in your personal statement. But I was thinking, after studying biochemistry now for 2 years, you're so old. What are the most sort of valuable skills as a biochemist that would be really good for a prospective student to show in their personal statement?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, as I said before, problem solving and data handling are really important. Because like I said, the practical aspect of biochemistry is so important. But also critical and analytical thinking, your ability to read something and think of your own hypotheses and maybe draw your own conclusions from what you've read. So for example, this may be a really horrible example and you may think this is really stupid, and maybe the tutors thought, oh bless Mary, I don't know about this, but at least you've had a go of trying to draw your own conclusion. But in my personal statement, I talked about how I read about telomerase, which is an enzyme which increases the length of your telomeres at the end of your chromosomes. And every time your cell divides or your DNA replicates, these telomeres shorten, and it's thought to be linked to aging. But also, if you have this telomerase, it's thought to extend it once again to delay the aging process. But also, having telomerase in the cell to keep extending your telomeres means that your cells can divide indefinitely, and this can lead to a tumor. So I said it's almost like a biochemical contradiction that you can prevent the aging process by having telomerase in your body, but it can lead to tumors and cancer that can sort of kill you. So what's the point in delaying aging if you could die from a tumor instead, So that's, I don't know how scientifically, great that is a point to make, but it showed that I could use information that I'd read and learned from academic papers and things and come to my own conclusion. So yeah, if you can try and do that, they will love that. Yeah, definitely.
That's actually really interesting, to be fair. It's kind of like, almost like you're not meant to live long. There's no point even trying to even fight against the fact that you want to try and stop aging, because you're just going to cause health problems. Well, no way. And
Yeah,
that's
I mean, I
really,
think this
it's
is
really
off
interesting.
topic. I think this is off topic, but I think we're seeing that anyway with the growing population and the problems we're having now with the overpopulation and food scarcity and is that because people are living longer, the planet can't contain or this amount of people or the fossil fuels we need to use or the food we need to cook or the food we need to grow and things. It's just getting a little bit crazy. or the forests that need to be cut down to produce enough meat, cows and meat and houses and things. So yeah, I mean, it definitely, maybe we aren't meant to live forever, but yeah, anyway, that's a different debate. But yeah, I think biology of aging was one of the things I found really interesting when applying to Oxford, and therefore I talked about it quite a lot in my personal statement. So you can tailor your personal statement to things that you're interested in personally.
No, that's really good actually. I'm glad that you brought up the fact that you can sort of, even if you go on to study in your degree and it makes complete and utter nonsense, like it's complete nonsense. I think the fact that you're sort of reading things, getting your head around things, and sort of drawing your own conclusions is something which is really important for scientists. Because at the end of the day, as you progress through your degree, you're going to be carrying out your own experiments, your own investigations, coming up with your own hypotheses. So you have to, I think it needs to be some sort of inborn response. But don't worry if you're not doing this at the moment. But I think, start asking questions about the things you're seeing, about the stuff you do. And I think just it leads on from there, I think, definitely. But no, that was really cool. Wow. I'm taken aback.
Thank you, Abbie. So kind of you.
So I just thought, can you just like briefly list off just some things that you talked about in your personal statement, and maybe some other things that you could talk about in a biochemistry personal statement, just to give like an idea of just some topics you could cover?
Yeah, I can briefly go through I've got my personal statement here, so I can literally go through briefly what I talked
Yeah,
about.
fab.
So my first paragraph was about the book I'd read, so Drunk DNA. Then my second paragraph was about a lecture I'd had on the unique summer school about aging and stem cells. And then I talked about the academic paper I'd read based on that too, and then used that to come to that conclusion. So yes. And then the next one I talked about the practical sessions on unique, about PCR, and then I also talked about because the chemistry central summer school at Cambridge, even though it was chemistry and it wasn't biochemistry related, I talked about how this was really useful for me because I got to have this practical experience, and also able to use the calculations I'd used at AS chemistry and like apply them to real life situations and real experiments that I'd done. And so even though that summer school wasn't directly related to biochem, there were so many skills I developed from that I could apply, and so I highlighted that. So that's a good skill, even if it's not directly related to biochemistry. Talk about the skills you developed and how they apply to biochemistry. And then my third paragraph, I talked about how I'd read an article in the New Scientist about the link between menopause and Alzheimer's, and then how that led me to write the extended project in Welsh Baccalaureate about the difference in prevalence in Alzheimer's between men and women. So I talked a lot about that and my conclusions for that paper. And then just like 3-4 lines on my extracurriculars and the skills that I developed from them and how that would help me with biochemistry. So always relating everything back to why I'd be a good candidate for biochemistry, or why I'm passionate about biochemistry. Yeah. And then what else you can talk about, like I said, lectures, podcasts, online courses, if you've had any lab experience. I'd try to not talk about your actual A-level studies so much, and talk more about what you've done outside of school, what you've done above and beyond the A-level curriculum, because that's what's going to impress tutors. Not, oh, I did genetics at A-level. Cool, so did everyone else who did A-level biology. So yeah, go above and beyond to show your passion. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. That's, I'd second that. I think try and avoid talking about your A levels, because like you said, everyone's done them, or everyone's done some form of like IB or whatever. So it's about showing a greater interest, if you like, and showing that you can learn the baseline knowledge from the curriculum and then build upon that. And yeah, that was really good. I'm glad you brought that up. So yeah, and it sounded like you mentioned earlier that you sort of kept to a few rigid things, but I suppose you've touched on quite a large, sort of quite big areas of biochemistry. So do you think it's okay to sort of branch out into big topics, or would you recommend maybe sticking down one route or whatever? if you get me.
I think it really depends on what you're passionate about, because obviously biochemistry, it's a sliding scale between biology and chemistry. Yeah, that's important. You've got to understand what biochemistry is before coming to university. So biochemistry is really using chemistry to understand biology and looking at everything at this molecular cellular level. So don't talk about like a whole body system, because in biochemistry, we're never going to look at that. We're going to look at the little molecular processes that go on in one organ or it's always at this molecular cellular level, and we very rarely, if ever, go above that. So make sure you know that, and make sure that stuff in your personal statement is at that level, because that obviously shows that you understand what it is about. But yeah, I guess my personal statement is linked way more to the more biological side. I find that side way more interesting than the more chemical side, because obviously there's a lot of organic chemistry. I could have talked about the structure and chemistry of DNA or proteins if I wanted to, and I know a lot of my friends did, about like the pi bonds that you don't learn about in school, but things, pi bonds and the orbitals of atoms and all this stuff, the more physically stuff you can talk about. But yeah, I was way more interested in the biology, genetics, aging, sort of Alzheimer's side of things, and so I did stick to that a bit more. And I still got in despite not really talking that much about the more chemistry topics within biochemistry. So yeah, I think it's just so important to talk about what you're passionate about, because now I love the more physically aspects. I found that I really have enjoyed them, but I think at the time I may not have, and therefore I wouldn't have come across as so passionate in my personal statement. So it's a good job I stuck to what I was passionate about at the time. So yeah.
Brilliant, yeah. And I thought I would just sort of touch on the sort of the idea of having sort of something which is quite cliche. I was just wondering, are there any cliches in biochemistry particularly that you think you could avoid? Like, I know, say physics, mentioning that you've gone to CERN, like it's amazing, but like quite a lot of students have done it. For I know, like earth sciences, mentioning that you want to Iceland is quite like it's something that a lot of students have done. So is there anything which you would, obviously you can mention it if you want to, but is there anything which you would recommend possibly maybe avoiding, if not avoiding, but like, you know what I mean, just maybe do something different?
Yeah, so there's three things I'm going to say. Three things. So biochemistry, the biochemistry site had a reading list, like a recommended reading list of things if you want to apply on their site. And I looked at it before I applied. And one of the books on there is The Selfish Gene, which you may have heard about, by Richard Dawkins. And like so many people put that on their personal statement, and so many people who put it on their personal statement have got in, but also they've seen it so many times before. And just do something. If that's the area of science and biochemistry that you're passionate about, put it down by all means. But if it's not really, like, I was way more interested in like DNA and mutations and and so I read junk DNA because that was where my passion was. So yeah, don't read a book because everyone else is reading it or you think you should. Another big topic that everyone talks about is CRISPR, because that's obviously like a huge biochemical thing that's always in the news or in academic magazines or the New Scientist, etc. So you can talk about it if that's what you're passionate about. But if you're just saying it because you think you should and that you think biochemistry students will find it impressive, don't. And then finally, it's going to be so tempting to talk about coronavirus on your personal statement at the moment. I think that's going to be, so many personal statements are going to have that on. So once again, if you're passionate about coronavirus and viruses and how all that works, write about it in your personal statement. If you're not, then read other things. Like I said it about all three things, but only do it if that's what you're passionate about. There's no point blabbing on about coronavirus because you think it's the new hot topic in biochemistry, because everyone's going to do it. So yeah, make it personal. It's a personal statement.
I think, yeah, that's, it's a good point to make, that you want to make yourself stand out. And so if you're following these cliches, you're sort of doing what everyone else is doing, that doesn't make you stand out. And that I thought that you sort of run the risk then of being sort of lost in this sea of all applicants. So I think, yeah, try and go for something which is a bit different. But like you said, Mary, like, don't be afraid to read The Selfish Gene if you're really really passionate and interested about it, because at the end of the day it's your opinions on it, it's your interpretation which they're looking for. And if it's a really cool and good interpretation that maybe the tutors have never seen before, then cool, put it down. You're different. That makes you stand out. So I thought I would just sort of wrap it all up, and the whole process of writing Oh, were you going to say something? Sorry, did you want to add to that?
No.
Oh, John. I was just gonna say, like, what's your sort of best tip that you would give to a prospective biochemist who's hoping to apply to Oxford?
Good question. In terms like general application process or for personal statements?
I think obviously with particular emphasis on personal statements, but then obviously for the whole application as well. You could do them separately actually if you want, just personal statement and then just application in general.
Okay, I think for personal statement is that everything you talk about, every book you've read or every lecture you've watched, don't just list things. The tutors don't care how many books you've read or how many lectures you've been to. They do not care. You could have gone to 1,000,000 or one. What they care about is what you've got from the lecture or the book or the podcast or the summer school. So talk about what you've learned, what you think about it, whether this is similar to something else you've read or watched or listened to, or why you think this is the way it is. That's what they want to know. So yeah, don't bog yourself down having like a huge library full of popular science biochemistry books and read them all and just list them, because they will not care. Yeah, so definitely just show engagement with what you read. And then a general application tip is, this is cliche, but believe in yourself. You can get into Oxford. Just believe that you can. It's definitely an achievable goal. So just work with that in mind. And I mean, me and Abbie are from, North Wales State School, like low income single parent family, and we have both got to Oxford. So yeah, there's nothing stopping you. Just go for it. Yeah, that's my top tip.
I'm gonna literally just lead on from that, what you said, Maz. Like, don't let anyone tell you that you're not good enough. Don't let anyone stand in the way of your goals. Like, if Oxford is your goal and biochemistry is your goal, go for it. Like, don't let anyone stop you. Don't let anyone put you down, or don't let people who are jealous of you put you down either, because you will get them. Unfortunately, that's the way of the world. Like, you will get people who are jealous of your aspirations. Just put them aside and just go for it. Just put all your effort in, because you can make it. But yeah, that was lovely. Anyway, so that's all we have time for today. We've learned some really, really cool and interesting stuff about applying for biochemistry at Oxford and just writing a personal statement. And particularly the telomere stuff. God, I got all shivery with that. Gosh, no wonder you got it. Oh god.
I think I just got in because they felt sorry for me, but I'm joking.
Nonsense. But thank you. Yeah, obviously, thank you so much for sharing what all the stuff that you put in your personal statement, Maz, and also like for sort of giving us a nice list of like supercurriculars that the students can look into and stuff. And yeah, for joining us at Oxford from the Inside. And so also thank you to our followers for listening to our podcast, or for watching this YouTube video. And also remember to follow us on Instagram. Our Instagram handle is @OxfordFromTheInside, all lowercase. And also check out our Facebook page for regular updates on our new content. And also to access our stuff, literally just type in Oxford from the Inside on Facebook, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, like we're everywhere.
We are everywhere.
Yeah, we're literally everywhere. Twitter, LinkedIn, like go for it. So anyway, I hope you all stay safe and well, and until next time, see ya. Bye.
Bye.